Folie, Deux, translated Madness Shared by Two, is Fall Out Boy's fourth studio album, and the last album they released before going on a 3-year hiatus. It's probably my favorite Fall Out Boy album lyrically, and it touches on a lot of very interesting themes. Maturity, narcissism, but most notably to me, fame. It's a theme that runs throughout the whole album, with almost every song having a line that touches on that aspect. It contextualizes the album as part of Fall Out Boy history. Folie, Deux is also an album that, in the writing process, contains both tension and the band coming together. It contains songs written out of spite and songs written with extreme empathy, the bipolar push and pull of Fall Out Boy. And sure, this is often how the writing went on pre-hiatus Fall Out Boy albums, but Folie's process is tainted by the hiatus, starting only a year after the release of the record. The stress that led to Fall Out Boy's hiatus can't have just sprung up in the year that they were touring on it, as turbulent as those tours were. And I want to talk about it. So, without further ado, here's Folie, Deux and Fame. Fall Out Boy was initially formed by frontman and bassist Pete Wentz and guitarist Joe Troman in 2001, but settled as a project when now lead singer Patrick Stump auditioned to be the drummer, afterwards showing them some songs he had written, which is when Wentz insisted that he sing. They shuffled around drummers while they recorded their first 2 EPs, Project Rocket Fall Out Boy, released May 28th, 2002, and Fall Out Boy's Evening Out With Your Girlfriend, released March 25th, 2003, against the band's wishes. They eventually settled on Andy Hurley as their drummer after he filled in on a few shows. They were given an unconventional release strategy for their first album, with it being released by indie label Fueled by Ramen while the band was technically signed to major label Island Records. Their debut, Take This to Your Grave, was released on May 3rd, 2003, to moderate success, with it now being considered a classic pop-punk album. This success allowed them to properly upstream to Island Records for their sophomore album, From Under the Cork Tree, which was a massive success. The record had smoothed out Fall Out Boy's writing process, with Pete Wentz writing the lyrics and Patrick Stump writing the music. Released on May 3rd, 2005, it debuted at number 9 on the Billboard 200, with the singles Sugar We're Going Down and Dance Dance charting at number 8 and number 9 on the Billboard Hot 100, respectively. This chart success drew tabloid attention to the band, greatly increased by Pete Wentz's high-profile relationship with singer Ashlee Simpson. But they weren't done, because their biggest album release to date came on February 6, 2007, with the release of their third album, Infinity on High. It debuted at number 1 on the Billboard 200, with the second single, This Ain't a Scene, It's an Arms Race, peaking at number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100. They headlined 2 large arena tours in 2007, the 7th annual Honda Civic Tour with Plus 44, Cobra Starship, and The Academy Is, and the Young Wild Things tour with Gym Class Heroes, Plain White Tees, and Cute Is What We Aim For. The massive success of this tour led to the release of their 2008 live album, Live in Phoenix, which included a cover of Michael Jackson's Beat It featuring John Mayer. The late 2000s was a turbulent time in the music industry. It was evident that album sales were on the decline and showed no signs of recovery. Music revenue was at the lowest it had been since the 80s, and record executives were taking notice. Andy Hurley, in an interview with NME in 2008, mentions the loss of MTV, saying, "When I shoot a video, I don't understand where it goes anymore. Before it was MTV, but now there are no shows that play videos anymore." Joe Troman mentions record label downsizing when asked about the lower sales of Infinity on High compared to From Under the Cork Tree. All of this comes down to the advent of the internet, and the 2000s struggle companies had to monetize it. File-sharing services like LimeWire were at their peak, and though legal digital downloads like iTunes were steadily growing, it wasn't nearly making up for the loss of album sale revenue. Along with the other big reason, people weren't spending a lot of money on music in the year 2008. Fall Out Boy opted to record their 4th studio album, Folie, Deux, under a level of secrecy, overwhelmed by the press surrounding Infinity on High. This proved a difficult endeavor, with Pete Wentz as a tabloid favorite at the time, again because of his high-profile relationship with Ashlee Simpson. Wentz and Simpson married in May of 2008 and announced they were having their first child, Bronx, who was born that November. And coming as a lyricist, when you have a lot of big changes in your life, you're going to write lyrics about them. And in the case of Pete Wentz, those lyrics will be great. Stump calls the making of Folie Deux painful, saying, "Pete and I fought more than we have in a long time. I threw something across the room over a major to minor progression." This polarizing writing process is reminiscent of stories told about the writing of From Under the Cork Tree, where Wentz and Stump would get into fistfights. There were lighter sides to the writing process of Folie too, most notably more involvement from guitarist Joe Trohman. In an interview with Alternative Press in 2008, he discusses how he didn't feel like Fall Out Boy was his band anymore, leading to a conversation with Stump that had the two collaborate more. "It made me feel like I own the songs a lot more," he says. "It made me really excited about contributing to Fall Out Boy and made me find my role in the band." Folie à Deux's lead single, I Don't Care, was released on September 8th, 2008, having an early release on iTunes on September 3rd. It charted at number 21 on the Billboard Hot 100. Subsequent singles did not chart higher than 74. With a release date originally set for 2008 Election Day, November 4th, the band decided to push it later due to the increasing seriousness of the election. The label, after the band had put their foot down about releasing the album that year, eventually gave them the release date of December 16th, 2008, which is when Folie à Deux did, finally, come out. "We wanted to make an ambitious record without giving the impression of an ambitious record," Pete Wentz says of Folie in an interview with Rolling Stone in September of 2008. They were trying to establish a musical tone that had less of the multi-track sound they had on Infinity on High, which brought on features of strings and horns and incredibly layered vocals. Joe Trohman says they weren't trying to push the envelope with Folie, saying, "The album still sounds like Fall Out Boy. It has big choruses, but you can't do the same thing every record." The experimentation was encouraged by Pete Wentz's more expansive and diverse lyricism, with Patrick Stump saying he wanted the music to mimic the content and tone of the lyrics, saying specifically of Head First Slide into Cooperstown on a Bad Bet, called Does Your Husband Know during this interview. Swagger is a great way to describe it, because on the song, he's lyrically adopting a character that has swagger, so I wanted the music to have that swagger. The verse is so confident and funky and forward because the lyric is so full of itself. This album brought on many more collaborations and cameos, starting out with bringing on Pharrell Williams to do some production on Wham's. What a Catch Donnie has the most features, as it contains an overlapping medley of older Fall Out Boy tracks, all sung by different people. Friends of the band, in the case of Gabe Saporta, Cobra Starship in Midtown, Travis McCoy, Gym Class Heroes, William Beckett, The Academy Is, Alexander DeLeon, The Cab, and Brendan Urie of Panic at the Disco, and personal heroes in the case of Elvis Costello, who was a huge influence on Patrick Stump, who agreed to sing the song despite having bronchitis at the time. Debbie Harry of Blondie performs on West Coast Smoker, and they brought on Lil Wayne, who Pete had previously called the best lyricist of 2006, to do a verse on Tiffany Blues. Folie à Deux feels much more straight rock than their previous records, which, even with the ambition of Infinity on High, still had that pop-punk twinge. Critics say it calls back to 80s stadium rock, filling the venues that Fall Out Boy had been playing. With more significant collaboration from Joe Trohman, the album's guitar parts lean a lot on his influences, with him specifically citing Queen as an inspiration for a lot of the guitar harmonies. Like every Fall Out Boy album, Patrick Stump is pushing himself vocally on Folie, most notably in his range, which we can now hear on lead vocals. From the low F2 on Head First Slide into Cooperstown on a Bad Bet, to the high G5 on the shipped gold standard. Along with his typical blue-eyed soul flair, with chorus-style harmonies littered throughout the whole album. Pete Wentz totally outdid himself on this record. He doesn't even know how good his lyrics are. Patrick Stump says of the lyrics on Folie à Deux, "It's the singer's favorite album lyrically," which he told Alternative Press in 2008. Wentz says that it's not an autobiographical record, as he was writing from others' perspectives, most notably his bandmates. "It's definitely my attempt to kind of visualize where someone else is." Folie à Deux, translated madness shared by two, is a term for a psychosis or delusion transmitted from one person to another. The two in this dynamic, the band says, represent many characters, but not the ones the tabloid press expect, i.e. Pete and Ashley, or for that matter, Pete and Patrick. They liken the dynamic to dysfunctional romances like Romeo and Juliet, Sid Vicious and Nancy Spungen, and publicity dynamics like Britney Spears and the paparazzi, the American government and the public. Stump goes as far as to say it's the only album where the theme of romance is not touched upon. Fall Out Boy called Folie a political record, but not in the red team, blue team politics the original Election Day release date might indicate. MTV describes it as the politics of the heart and mind, primarily exploring the collapse in trust in relationships, whether that's between a married couple or the public and the media. Stump calls it a message record, about the materialistic dance between any two parties who are obsessed with each other. The message, especially in early interviews, appears to be about the vanity of the culture of the time, with the growing popularity of social media. That's the oft-cited interpretation of the lead single, I Don't Care, highlighted in the chorus line, I don't care what you think as long as it's about me. Pete Wentz, notoriously terrible at explaining his lyrics, describes Folie Deux in this light, calling it a critique of the narcissistic nature of the culture, and how it teaches people to focus only on themselves. Here you are. The section you probably expect if you came from my largest platform. Given that I have as much time as I want here on YouTube, I'm gonna do a track by track. I'm deeply sorry if you're a friend of mine and you're watching this to support me. Just use my voice as background noise while you do homework or something. And a content warning before any of you get too far into this. This section features discussion of drug abuse, mental illness, and suicide as a necessity of discussing the lyrical content of Folie Deux. I try to be vague surrounding these topics, but the lyrics of 27, $20 Nosebleed, and West Coast Smoker require some in-depth discussion of it. It's not super deep, but it is like, I mentioned specific drugs, and especially on $20 Nosebleed. And I do bring up the death of soul singer Donny Hathaway in my analysis of What a Catch, Donny. So be aware, be safe. Now that I've gotten that out of the way, let's start at the very beginning. Folie Deux opens with the ethereal organ intro to Disloyal Order of Water Buffaloes. The song is a musical masterpiece after the intro taking on a very traditional rock instrumentation, with open, wide room production. Stump's layered vocals take center stage, filling out a lot of the empty space in the airy production. It feels the stadium's Fall Out Boy had begun playing. Lyrically, Disloyal Order poetically dances around being mentally ill in the public eye, and touches on the unhealthy lifestyles of the famous. The strong opening line, I'm coming apart at the seams, pitching myself the leads in other people's dreams, sets this tone immediately. A dysfunctional man being viewed and loved, pitched in the leads by the public. Wentz expands on this further in the first verse, describing a scene where he's arrested and examined before proclaiming, "Hey editor, I'm undeniable," that his catastrophe has to be covered by the media. The pre-chorus appears to describe his role in the band, a loose bolt of a complete machine, which flows directly into Wentz's genius lyrics annotation on the line, "What a match, I'm half doomed and you're semi-sweet," as being about lead singer Patrick Stump. Parasocial relationships are touched on in the second verse, as the line, "Little girl got me staring odd, or was that just a telescopic camera nod?" examines how fans create false representations of a connection in their head. The chorus emphasizes the dysfunctional lifestyle being in a band can bring, detox just to retox, and referencing that he's wasting his life, asking for another shot. Along with putting a common criticism of Fall Out Boy at the time, nobody wants to hear you sing about tragedy, both demonstrating people's issues with Fall Out Boy and possibly highlighting an issue Wentz has with the scene he brought up, as his label, Decadence at the time, had brought up many bands who simply sang about tragedy. Andy Hurley's classic drum fill starts Foley's hit, I Don't Care, joined quickly by a classic syncopated catchy guitar riff. This groove persists throughout the song, embracing the arrogance of its lyrics. Patrick Stump's blue-eyed soul voice stands out most on the call-and-response style bridge, a staple in their live set that builds into a cathartic halftime third chorus. Joe Troman's added lead guitar lines, especially in the last chorus, call back to his 80s rock influences and fill out the sound, along with artfully incorporating the Queen-style choral harmonies that run as a through line on the record. Lyrically, it opens with as much arrogance as possible. Say my name and his in the same breath, and I dare you to say they taste the same. The common lore about this song is that Stump wrote it vaguely out of spite while he and Wentz were fighting. This anger seethes through the song, including the way lines are put together, which Stump often does himself with things Pete has written. "These friends, they don't love you, they just love the hotel suites," is almost a bite at Wentz and his lifestyle, but it also bites at the celebrity lifestyle of the time, people getting close to you for money and other connections. The chorus is political, in the growing attention economy of the time, blatantly stating the attitude, "I don't care what you think as long as it's about me," the "any press is good press" mentality that led to modern outrage marketing. Despite its anger, "I Don't Care" also contains undeniable sexual tension, highlighted in the second verse. "Free love on the streets, but in the alley it ain't that cheap," continues a reference from Disloyal Order to prostitution, which he could be comparing to the music industry, saying that being famous is selling yourself in the same way that sex work is. Celebrity culture, even today, also revolves heavily around who famous people are fucking. The tabloids become invested in their lives and relationships and put them onto us. I Don't Care's narrator pushes the idea that gets one through this, however unhealthy, the best of us can find happiness in misery. She's My Winona starts out just as groovy as I Don't Care, but out of the gate with a far lighter tone. This song, out of all the ones so far, really demonstrates the use of Stump's voice as an instrument. The vocal line between stanzas could have just as easily been played on a guitar. But it's a prime example of the instrumental use of vocals, often as a part of simplifying the instrumentation on this record, only bringing in a few synths outside of their standard two-guitar rock band lineup. The guitar work is also extraordinary, especially with the clever verse contrast of the clean tone and distorted guitar. It brings in the contrasting themes of the song, playing with Stump and Troman's focus on the writing to complement the lyrics, which also deal heavily in contrast, beginning, naturally, with life and death. "Life's just a pace car on death," the verse proclaims, before contrasting Fall Out Boy's sad, emo image with how Wentz feels in the moment. "The only thing suicidal here is the Doors. We had a good run, even I have to admit." Implying that Fall Out Boy had a good run profiting off of Wentz's depressing lyrics, but he's not feeling that anymore. Fall Out Boy changing is brought up again in the second verse, even threatening the band's irrelevance. "Never the same person when I go to sleep as when I wake up." They say in contrast to the band's earlier work, "Baby seasons change but people don't, on the takeover that breaks over." The theme of contrast really concludes with the chorus, "Hell or glory, I don't want anything in between," the all or nothing thought. It continues to reference a baby, relevant for Wentz at the time given his then-wife Ashley Simpson's pregnancy with his son, and though I think that's why the theme comes up, I do believe that the baby is supposed to be Pete Wentz himself. He believes that he has to show the world his thunder, get his hell or glory, all or nothing. Bringing back the heavy drum, rhythmic focus first introduced on Disloyal Order, we begin America's Sweethearts, which, in comparison to the rest of the record, probably brings back quite a bit of their older, more pop-punk sound, especially in the chorus. But it still reads as a bit more classic rock than anything else. Backing vocals on this song take center stage. Very close harmonies, and their delicate use as melody contributes to the much lighter tone of this music, creating the soft image of the famous we see in the media. The lyrics discuss primarily adjusting to being famous, new on the scene and new to the lifestyle. I'm accidentally gonna say a Good Charlotte title, aren't I? Constantly discussing the lifestyles of the rich and the famous. "Why won't the world revolve around me?" the first verse exclaims, then professing that they would do good with this fame. "In my dreams, trees grow all over the streets." Contrasting this, the second verse discusses the image of humility we want our celebrities to portray. "You can bow and pretend that you don't know you're a legend." The Americana imagery is evident, as well as the image of American celebrity. The narrator of this song, like Lee Wentz, is new to the lifestyle in the pre-chorus, not knowing much about the fancy, classic cars the wealthy around him buy, but knowing people who do other expensive things. Got a lot of friends stuck on classic Coke, which is likely contrasting Wentz's experience with mainstream celebrity, wealth, and classic cars, with signs of fame more common in the rock scene. Enough money to buy cocaine. The line, "Media Blitz, an onset of press and paparazzi," comes before the chorus's opening line, "Let's hear it for America's Sweethearts," which alludes to two things. The first, and most obvious, is the media's obsession with relationships, which Wentz has first-hand experience with. Guys in rock bands aren't tabloid big until they're dating pop singers or actresses. Pete Wentz was the only tabloid staple of Fall Out Boy, and the same thing happened with Joel Madden of Good Charlotte, who had two tabloid relationships with actresses Hilary Duff and Nicole Richie. But the second is about Hollywood relationships being a sort of facade, given the use of the homophone to play on hotel suites. which references being in a relationship just for sex or money. The second line of the chorus, I'm in love with my own sins, completes the mindset of fame. I'm fine with the fake relationships, the unhealthy lifestyle. In fact, I've fallen in love with it. Head First Slide was my favorite song on Folie Deux when I first listened to it, and it's definitely still one of my favorites. The weight of the song, carried through the bassy instrumentation and heavy use of Patrick Stump's rich lower range, is evident in the music. It also effortlessly blends two very contrasting styles between the verses and the chorus. Despite being a quintessentially Folie song in my head, its instrumentation is probably the most reminiscent of their work on Infinity on High, with its ambitious instrumentation. With a heavy use of synth, brass, and strings, it really calls back to that production, and it adds a sort of texture to the song. The lyrics at first are reminiscent of country-style cheating songs, with some arrogance expected of Folie. Does your husband know the way to worship our love? We learn through the chorus that both parties are cheating, and the narrator is also being cheated on. I will never end up like him, behind my back I already am. The first verse functions as a sort of self-preservation in this affair. I don't just want to be a footnote in someone else's happiness. An aside in someone's happy marriage. They also acclaim themselves Mr. Sandman, and possibly the dream lover he was to send in the song Mr. Sandman. Wentz also dubs his character in the America's Sweethearts music video Mr. Sandman, lending this credence. The second verse is a criticism of the other party, the way she presents herself, and the threat of what if you peaked early, which could also be a line representing himself or his bandmates, who were relatively young during Fall Out Boy's at the time peak. Outside of the narrative of the song, the calendar reference in the chorus is often considered to be referenced or related to Panic at the Disco's song The Calendar, which Wentz co-wrote for their album Vices and Virtues. And the story of Head First Slide could easily be the hotel suite loves referenced throughout the rest of the album, the page 6 affairs Folie Deux puts a spotlight on. Sometimes I want to quit this all and become an accountant now, is how the shipped gold standard opens, with accounting being a profession that no one really asks questions about. This all is likely Wentz's fame in the music industry. He wants to leave that all behind and have no one ask any more questions, no one to be concerned about his personal life. But he can't, and he doesn't want to, as we learn in the second line, I'm no good at math, and besides, the dollar is down. The shipped gold standard has the musical simplicity they were going for. It's a rock song with crazy groove, almost calling back to Franz Ferdinand and their rock music to make girls dance. It's a little heavier than that, and the bridge goes in an entirely different direction, shifting the whole sound of the song for the first lyrically separate bridge on the album. The interaction between the two guitars on this song is perfect. They're both playing more traditional rhythm parts, but they play off of each other in a way that keeps the mid-layers of the song incredibly interesting. Patrick Stump really leans into vocal experimentation on this album, almost showing off in a way. The almost second lead on the final chorus is introduced on Infinity on High, but a staple of Folie Deux, becomes a trademark Fall Out Boy sound on subsequent albums. It's so quintessential, I could never imagine living at a time where this was their final album. Well, technically I can, but I was not really invested in American rock band Fall Out Boy between the ages of 4 and 7. I often do a queer reading of this song, starting initially from the pre-chorus. I want to scream I love you from the top of my lungs, but I'm afraid that someone else will hear me, which contains the desire to express your love freely and the often queer fear that the world will react negatively, that you're required to hide this love out of fear of violence. Also, in the bridge, it's basically confirmed to be a queer love. Tell that boy I'll leave you alone now, like a stove I'll turn my love down. Like he's in love with this guy and he has to keep it to himself for both him and the other's safety. The chorus even has sort of queer themes, however dysfunctional, as it describes the pair running away and creating new identities. I might say that Coffees for Closers is the best song on Folie Deux. If it's not the best, it's my favorite. It's up-tempo and instrumentally full and massive, despite it mostly just having a string quartet as added instrumentation. Okay, the last chorus has a full orchestra, but it's perfectly integrated into the song. I've grown up playing violin, and rock music with strings is my kryptonite, especially with the wide production that Folie Deux has. The stadium-filling sound is perfect, especially, like, even the chunky downstroke guitars, like, sound really full and open, and the 80s style lead lines naturally. You can even hear that Andy Hurley started out as a metal drummer with the placement of the 16th note fills. It's the peak of all of Folietta's influences. The chorus is addicting to sing along to, and it has an artful use of pop-punk style gang vocals, calling back to Fall Out Boy's earlier work. It's a simpler song lyrically, with a lot of catchy repetition, with the key line being, "Change will come, I will never believe in anything again." And it's a relatively simple story to follow. As a criticism of the culture, it comments on how jaded the world can make us, especially when we're only told to think about things we can't control. Preach electric to a microphone stand, almost asking someone who cannot change to care about something. A microphone stand can't really become electric. It also references conflicted feelings about their career and reconciling with the changes that will come with that. I want everything to change and stay the same. Time doesn't care about anyone or anything. The first verse also indirectly predicts the fall of rock from the mainstream. Only get lonely when you read the charts, as slowly but surely less and less rock bands were charting, including Fall Out Boy. There wasn't a single rock song on the Billboard year-end Hot 100 between the years of 2010 and 2012. Fall Out Boy naturally broke that in 2013 with their album, but Coffees for Closers does reconcile with the, at this point, hypothetical fall of Fall Out Boy. Change will come, but they will never believe in anything again. What a Catch, Donnie is about Patrick Stump. It is. He said it himself to Absolute Punk in 2008, saying, "Pete was kind of writing in a character, and the weird thing is that it's like me. It's as if I wrote the lyrics, but I didn't. And I'm not being narcissistic, it's really cool. It's impressive to me how well he has me figured out. So it just made me respect him that much more as a writer." Wentz also introduces it live with little speeches about friendship and what your friends believe about themselves.
You know when you have a friend who just thinks they're a loser, and you know they're not a loser, and you just kind of want to be like, "Hey, idiot." Yeah, this song's about that guy. It's called What a Catch, Donnie.
Alt Press calls What a Catch a rare ballad, which would be accurate if there wasn't a ballad on every major label Fall Out Boy album. At about this point in the track list, functionally being Folie's I've Got a Dark Alley and a Bad Idea That Says You Should Shut Your Mouth, or Golden. It definitely has the Folie sound, especially with the prominence of the classic rock tone lead guitar lines. A beautiful side effect of having guitarist Joe Troman more heavily involved in the writing. Also a little more major than Fall Out Boy's previous ballads, making Folie seem a little bit more healthy than other albums at this point in time. What a Catch, Donnie also features a bridge of reprises of older Fall Out Boy songs, the biggest songs off of their previous albums. In order of appearance in the song, they are Grand Theft Autumn off of Take This to Your Grave, Sugar We're Going Down, and Dance Dance off of From Under the Cork Tree, This Ain't a Scene, It's an Arms Race, and Thanks for the Memories off of Infinity on High, and Growing Up off of Evening Out with Your Girlfriend. It also has Elvis Costello singing a reprise of the chorus to Head First Slide into Cooperstown on a Bad Bet, which appeared earlier on Folie à Deux. The Donnie in this song's title is likely referring to the late soul singer Donny Hathaway, as the lyrics of the pre-chorus reference his most prominent musical partner, Roberta Flack. Miss Flack said, "I still want you back." It's almost an interpolation of the relationship between these two songwriting partners onto that of Wentz and Stump. Donny Hathaway died by suicide in 1979, and given Wentz's history with mental health issues and suicide attempts, he likely considers himself the Donny in this scenario, paired with this sarcastic "what a catch" from Stump's perspective in the lyrics. This title, naturally, is a reference to the pop cultural phenomenon of the 27 Club, a group of celebrities who died at age 27, often of drug overdose. Pete Wentz, at the time, was over-medicated and living recklessly, in the style of old rock stars, what Wentz compared to the lifestyles of those in the 27 Club. Fall Out Boy and their team were actually relieved on Wentz's 28th birthday, with Stump getting a call from their manager saying that they'd made it. The lyrics of 27 discuss this unhealthy lifestyle. Both verses touch on drug use with lines like, "I'd shoot the sunshine into my veins and milligrams in my head, burning tobacco in the wind." And most obviously, the chorus line, "doing lines of dust and sweat off last night's stage," but I also think that line is about parasocial relationships and how fans feel. as it continues just to feel like you. Fans can ride off the high of seeing their favorite bands in concert for weeks, as I personally can attest. Even going and looking back at videos I've taken at concerts feels like the doing lines of dust and sweat off the stage, the way that Wentz describes. The second pre-chorus brings back the theme of unhealthy famous friends. I've got a lot of friends who are stars, but some are just black holes. The chorus lyrics are a clear showcase of how Wentz might feel that his suffering is essential to his image and career. My mind is a safe, and if we keep it in, we all get rich. Discussing how his lyrics about his mental illness have made Fall Out Boy's records successful. 27 calls on Fall Out Boy's classic rock influences, which makes sense given that the drug use and unhealthy habits Wentz discusses in this song were common in that era. The guitar solo Joe Troman gets on this record is perfect. It's not show-offy, blending in well with Stump's previous vocal melodies, and absolutely embodying the energy of this song. 27 solo, my beloved. The thing I've always found the most interesting about Tiffany Blues is the transition to the chorus. The pre-chorus line, 3, 2, 1, we go live, to a chorus that lyrically has hardly anything to do with the verses, but is very reminiscent of the image the public has of Fall Out Boy's songs. A self-deprecating love song with metaphors, what someone might expect if a late night show took control of what Fall Out Boy was writing, even down to the music, bringing it back to their more pop-punk popular image. The guitar lines and drum parts straighten out from their more syncopated, funky beat emphasis in the verses. It really emphasizes the facade of the industry that the rest of the song discusses. My friends all lie and say they only want the best wishes for me. I'm cocktail party doing all right. Even Lil Wayne's verse talks about this. Not the boy I was, the boy I am is just venting. They don't necessarily mean all of the drab, depressing things Wentz often writes lyrics about. He's just venting for the public. Musically, Tiffany Blues hints more towards Stump's future solo work than it says anything about Fall Out Boy's influences. There's a jazz-style guitar line underneath the verses that sounds exactly like something off Soul Punk to me. It's a detail I didn't notice until coming back to it now, and also listening to it on repeat for hours. Fun fact about writing this part of the video is that I listened to all of these songs on repeat for, like, multiple hours while I wrote, like, each separate track. I'm not okay. It's gonna ruin my stats when like replay and wrapped comes around. It's just gonna be like, you listened to Folie Deux for too much time, and I'm gonna be like, yeah, I did. Tiffany Blues also features a lot more synths than other tracks on Folie Deux, which I think is incredibly effective, especially when it comes to neatly incorporating Lil Wayne's auto-tune effect. It's really smart. So Lil Wayne comes in mostly over layers of Stump's backing vocals, but because of the setup of the synths in the rest of the song, it doesn't feel out of place in any way, despite the more naturalistic production on Stump's vocals and on the rest of the album. The title, an acronym for waitress, actress, model, singer, says enough about the industry in and of itself. A commentary about how young people who move to LA to pursue their dreams still call themselves everything they aspire to be, even if they're not doing that professionally. Whams is a straight rock song at its best. It jams. Andy Hurley's drum pattern is written to be pretty standard, but he's solid and always adds like the fills and flair that bring the song up a level. The way the guitars play off of each other again is really interesting in the verses. Both syncopated rhythm guitars like playing off of each other over the straight drum and bass track. There's another underlying jazz guitar in the chorus, which takes over in the angelic instrumental bridge. Lyrically, this track focuses on a reckless relationship, where the narrator seems emotionally distant and his lover is overly attached. I'm gonna leave you, I'm gonna teach you how we're all alone. It's not like they don't want this person, but they're too emotionally attached for what they want. The narrator would much rather meet in the purgatory of their hips. The track ends with what almost sounds like a voice memo recording of Stump singing a soul-style track a cappella, likely a recording of something he was improvising in the studio. If it lyrically connects to the rest of the song, it continues the idea of this reckless nature of the relationship, wasting it all in the back of a long dark car, and the narrator expresses a want to only be remembered for this, to be golden in their memory. This is easily the most overtly political track on the album, with obvious confirmed references to the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Most notably with the second verse, "Goes to the desert, the same war his dad rehearsed, came back with flags on coffins and said we won." And a line in Pete Wentz's spoken word poem at the end of the song, "I've got enough miles on my card to fly the boys home on my own," which Pete said is about the boys in Iraq and Afghanistan. It also discusses the abuse of the amphetamine Benzedrine, which was often prescribed to war veterans diagnosed with PTSD after World War II. The song and title reference some of its side effects: permanent jet lag, drowsiness, and nosebleeds. It's an interesting look at the drug addiction often experienced by veterans, and the way that the medical industry will just prescribe often dangerous drugs for problems they don't want to deal with. That doesn't mean don't take your meds. If you've been prescribed your meds by the doctor and they're working, you should take your goddamn meds. Just sometimes they do that. Benzedrine is only approved in the US for ADHD, narcolepsy, and short-term weight loss. $20 Nosebleed, like the experience many people have with stimulants, is an upbeat poppy tune. The light piano chords are almost made to distract you from the dark experiences described in the lyrics. On a purely musical level, it's an up-tempo pop-rock jam with anthemic horns and an interesting duet format, both vocally and instrumentally, as the piano and the guitar do a similarly functioning duet in the verses. But obviously, the song is about drug addiction among war veterans, so it's really interesting that it's about an amphetamine addiction specifically, and then it's like, oh, the song is upbeat and you're focused on the high, but the lyrics are about feeling down and feeling low and like just wanting to go back. Permanent jet lag, please take me back. Folie Deux ends with a bang, hitting us with the rocking West Coast smoker, the guitar-heavy tune with some hardcore-style screaming, calling back to the band's pre-Fall Out Boy roots. There's always some worth in a 4-on-the-floor rock song, and the playing of the syncopated guitar line over such a straight rhythm section makes the song addictive. The very segmented instrumental contrasts heavily with the flowy vocal melodies, most obvious in the delivery of "Follow the Disorganized Religion of My Head." A classic Fall Out Boy anthemic chorus featuring guest vocals from Debbie Harry of Blondie completes the song, giving it a sharp edge. Pete Wentz, in his NME Track by Track, says this song is about friends who have been taken in too deep, which is nonsense, Pete. That doesn't mean anything. I try and watch Pete Wentz explain his lyrics. They never make sense. I mean, sometimes he's like, this is a reference to this, and I'm like, okay, I get that. But sometimes it means nothing. Like, how does this relate to the lyrics of West Coast Smoker, Pete? Likely into the unhealthy, famous lifestyle that Folie discusses. Come on in, the water's warm, come on like a sugar cube, enticed into the drugs and reckless living by nice things and famous friends. It highlights drug use as an unhealthy way of dealing with unhealthy emotions, and frames the behaviors of rich and famous drug users. We'll never get through customs, let's just take off again instead. In a neutral light, almost as if it's from the perspective of these famous friends, but the song still wants you, the listener, to see that these habits are unhealthy. To look at the unhealthy habits and be like, I don't want to do what they're doing. That doesn't seem cool. To see that the habits are unhealthy and are going to kill them. And it's a way to end Folie Deux. Oh god, this is where we get into a very opinion-y thing. I think that What a Catch, Donnie should be the last song on Folie Deux, with the medley of previous Fall Out Boy songs, with the just finality of the sound of What a Catch, Donnie. Like, it should end the album, and it would be a super effective end, knowing that they go on hiatus after this album. I think that What a Catch, Donnie should have ended the album. I think that What a Catch, Donnie, completes the album cycle a little bit better. Both musically, it, ends on a calmer note, and, lyrically, it, comes full circle, and I just don't know why they didn't, because Patrick thinks that it completes the album. It's a Fall Out Boy decision that will never make sense to me. But West Coast Smoker touching on a lot of the themes of Fall Out Boy, it does make sense why they might have wanted it to end the album. However I feel about it. What is it? 13 years later? 13? 14. Almost 14 years later. Fall Out Boy embarked on the Believers Never Die Part 2 tour in 2009 to promote Folie, Deux, one of their most turbulent and eventful tours, with Cobra Starship, All Time Low, Metro Station, Hey Monday, and 50 Cent as opening acts. The North American tour had a sort of hex on it, according to Pete Wentz at the time. Only a month into the tour, they'd had a show canceled due to lightning and 2 trips to the hospital, both involving pop band Cobra Starship. They got food poisoning, and Gabe Zaporta sprained his ankle jumping off of a drum riser. At the time, these runs were thought of as rough, but overall a great run of shows. But this tour was rougher than even first thought. Reception of Folie Deux was not nearly as positive as their previous albums, both critically. It's a very loose term. I'm just quoting Patrick Stump directly. And by fans. Getting booed off stage for just playing some of your newer songs can never be fun. Patrick Stump, in his devastating We Liked You Better Fat Confessions of a Pariah post on his website, posted on February 28th, 2012, says, "Touring on Folie was like being the last act at a vaudeville show. We were rotten vegetable targets in clandestine hoodies." Fall Out Boy went on hiatus at the end of 2009 after their Madison Square Garden show with Blink-182 on October 4th. They would each delve into other projects over the next few years. Pete Wentz formed electropop band Black Cards with BB Rexa in 2010, releasing the EP Use Your Disillusion and 2 mixtapes. Joe Troman and Andy Hurley formed supergroup The Damned Things with Keith Buckley and Josh Newton of Every Time I Die, and Scott Ian and Rob Caggiano of Anthrax, which, though going quiet in 2012, did have a revival in 2016, though without Newton and Caggiano, who were replaced by Alkaline Trio's Dan Adriano. And Patrick Stump pursued a brief solo career, releasing the EP Truant Wave and album Soul Punk, which has developed a cult following in recent years. Though after a little while performing, he moved away from the spotlight and did writing work for other artists, including Bruno Mars and Yellowcard. This was a necessary break for the band. On Kerrang! Magazine's Inside Track podcast, they discuss how back in 2009, both Troman and Stump were making it clear that they needed to take a break. The two were young, 17 when Fall Out Boy started, and had been in this massive band for the entirety of their adult lives, being only 21 when Fall Out Boy hit it big with From Under the Cork Tree. Troman specifically mentions a need to have a normal, stable life outside of work with the band, consistent places to live, and get mental health help. At the time, Pete Wentz didn't think he needed a break, but with the new baby at the time and later his divorce, it worked out conveniently for him. Expressing a need to find his identity outside of the band, Wentz did indeed end up needing a break. And on February 4th, 2013, Fall Out Boy announced their comeback with the release of the song My Songs Know What You Did in the Dark, the first single off of their upcoming album, Save Rock and Roll. Folie Deux is one of my favorite albums. The music is strong, and the lyrics and what they showcase about Fall Out Boy and the culture at the time. And even though it received slightly lower ratings and lower sales at the time, it has evolved in the view of fans and become a sort of classic. This kind of thing is common with Fall Out Boy projects. Albums hated initially develop fan bases over time, and are eventually classics in the same way as well-loved albums. It happened with Folie, it happened with Soul Punk, I'm betting it'll happen with Mania. Fame's effect on the writing of Folie is obvious, even down to how they did it. Recording in secret, Pete Wentz running from paparazzi. Even with the band's interpretation as a commentary on the culture, the late 2000s was the peak of the tabloids. Britney Spears went under her conservatorship just before the writing of this album. I think it covers the theme well, given the experience Wentz has with the industry. It does a good job of critiquing the culture at the time and almost foreshadows our current celebrity culture. But Folie à Deux, the writing and the touring, is tainted by Fall Out Boy's hiatus less than a year later. We're often looking for tension within the band, something that we might have gotten to hear on the album, something we might have seen on their tours. But the reality is, there aren't necessarily things we can point to. What the band said about the writing has shown the most unity of their pre-hiatus albums, with the way that the music was written to fit with Wentz's lyrics and having Joe Troman doing a lot more of the writing. It was Fall Out Boy finally figuring out how to do Fall Out Boy in a way that made everyone happy. And, in fact, is the closest to how they wrote their post-hiatus albums. The reality is, Fall Out Boy's hiatus was a slow build. They'd slowly become one of the most polarizing bands in the country, getting more and more attention on them, both negative and positive, which the younger members of the band, who'd spent their entire adult lives doing this, knew they couldn't handle. The hiatus was inevitable. And clearly, they've come back from that. Their first album after their hiatus, Save Rock and Roll, was a smash hit, debuting at #1 on the Billboard 200. Following that, their 2015 album, American Beauty, American Psycho, is their biggest album yet, surpassing their 2000 success with 3 hit singles, Centuries, Uma Thurman, and Immortals, which appeared in the 2014 animated feature Big Hero 6. Their 7th studio album, Mania, though it didn't perform nearly as well as American Beauty, American Psycho, became their 4th album to debut at #1. If anything, Fall Out Boy is more famous now than they were writing about fame. So clearly they, in their now adult lives, have adjusted. So that was Folie and Fame. I spent so long writing that video. And I mean, not even like so long. Like I didn't take a break in the way that I did in my 2 previous video essays, because like I wrote the first half. I wrote most of the first part, the first like 4 parts of the Water Parks video back in June of 2021. And then it came out in November, cause I just like stopped working on it and then I took it back up and finished it. I didn't do that in the same way with this video, like it was just like Folie and Fame, for a while. And I'm very happy with it. I'm very happy with this video. It's my longest video yet, I guarantee it. Script estimates this video being around an hour. I'm a true video essayist. My videos are an hour long. That's so much fun for me. But yeah, thank you for watching. Thank you for making it this far into the video. Thank you for listening to me rant about Fall Out Boy for an hour. Very few people do that without being annoyed at me. If you want to watch other stuff that I've made, I've written 2 other video essays, one about the history of Water Parks label drama, and one on the turbulent history of All Time Low's Dirty Work. If you like me, you can listen to my music. I have an album out called Episode 16. My artist name is Taylor Squared. You can listen to it here. You can listen to it on Spotify. You can listen to it on Apple Music. I'll have all the links in the description. You can follow me on social media. I have an Instagram. I have a Twitter technically, but I don't use it. If you're watching this video, you probably have seen my TikTok. Niche internet micro celebrity TikTok user Battery Blood. I'm in a band called Borderline Thrills. You can follow our social media at Borderline Thrills on Instagram, at Borderline Thrills on TikTok, at Borderline without border, no vowels, line Thrills on Twitter. If you want to see the exactly 3 people that we follow on Twitter and a grand total of nothing else, none of us want to run the Twitter. No one is going to run the Twitter. It's going to be nothing. But yeah, that was Folie and Fame. Thank you all for watching. Have a great day.